France is famous for its beautiful sights and its delicious food, but it's also infamous for its aggressive drivers.
Well, the French are the first to admit that it can be a bit wild on the roads out there, especially here in Paris.
Speeding, road rage, drivers who tailgate you, insult you, give you the finger. It can be terrifying.
And on top of all that, some of the road rules are downright confusing, and getting your license is an obstacle course.
In this French Connections Plus, we'll buckle up and merge into French driving.
Vroom, vroom.
Part of the reason French drivers get such a bad rap is because driving here in Paris is so tricky, especially if you're from out of town.
Now, to put it simply, driving in the capital is a nightmare. There's no clear logic to which way the streets are going. You've got motorcycles and scooters and pedestrians jumping out at you. Often people will honk at you, insults will be flying, and then parking is just a figment of the imagination.
You'd be forgiven for thinking there's no real rules of the road here in France, and I'd even say that people in Paris take a certain amount of pride in their aggressive driving.
Non mais...
C'est bon, ça c'est bon.
À 500. Il y a très peu de gens courtois.
Vous faites insulter parfois?
Klaxonner, oui, insulter aussi. Et oui.
Il y a plus de monde à Paris, donc c'est un peu logique qu'on soit effectivement plus que les autres.
En voiture, on est enfermé dans sa voiture, donc on se croit invincible.
Alors, andouille, tu peux pas traverser dans les clous et patate.
Je m'énerve tout seul. Je tape sur mon volant avec des noms d'oiseaux.
Vous êtes témoin parfois d'altercations entre les automobilistes?
Il y a longtemps que j'ai pas vu ça, mais quand c'est moi, je cogne.
Je vois pas les voitures arriver, du coup je m'avance, je regarde, finalement je recule, il y a des gens qui arrivent, c'est pas toujours évident, pas toujours pratique.
Ils respectent même pas les piétons. Alors je peux vous dire, il y a un petit bonhomme rouge, il traverse au rouge. Et nous, on se fait arrêter.
Déjà qu'on a les piétons, qu'on a les taxis, qu'on a les VTC, qu'on a les bus et qu'on a les voitures, si en plus on se tape les trottinettes, je sais pas comment on va s'en sortir.
French drivers are the first to admit they have issues with road rage, and that's probably because there is some truth to the matter.
Well, studies suggest that French drivers are amongst the most aggressive in Europe. Let's just say that when it comes to road etiquette, the French leave a lot to be desired and can be quite reckless behind the wheel.
French drivers say they do take risks, so whether it's in regard to fatigue, speeding, distractions with their devices. In fact, 20% of French drivers say they become another person behind the wheel.
Well, I admit I do. I drive like a grandmother, but an aggressive grandmother. Now, what's interesting, though, is despite the incivilities and the breaking of the rules, the number of road deaths in France has been dropping over the years.
Road deaths reached a peak 50 years ago when some 18,000 people were killed in 1 year. By 2021, that number had dropped to 1,400.
Things have been getting better thanks to public policy, better cars, raised awareness, and tighter rules.
If you hit the road in France, you'll want to be familiar with some basic regulation. To drive a car, you have to be at least 18 years old with a valid license, and you'd better buckle up, as seatbelts are compulsory for all occupants of a vehicle, front and back. How fast you can go varies depending on what kind of road you're on and weather conditions. The speed limit is 50 kilometers an hour in urban areas, 80 outside of built-up areas, and 130 on highways, limited to 110 kilometers an hour when it's raining. In some big cities like Paris, the speed limit is 30 kilometers an hour, so don't push the pedal to the metal. For a country that worships wine, there are very strict rules when it comes to drinking and driving. The legal blood alcohol limit is 0.5 grams a liter, which is more or less the equivalent of about 2 glasses of alcohol. Meanwhile, France, the country with the most distinct varieties of cheeses, is also the country with the most roundabouts in the world. Estimates put the number of ronds-points between 20 and 65,000, and some 500 new ones are built a year. Be sure to look out for the creative and often absurd art installations in the middle. But remember to keep your eyes on the road.
The French do love their roundabouts, and we're here at one of the most famous ones. This is the Rond-Point des Champs-Élysées racing around the Arc de Triomphe.
In my opinion, it's one of the scariest and most confusing places to drive in France. And that's because, unlike at other roundabouts where the person in the circle gets the right of way, here a different rule applies. It's called la priorité à droite, and it's the rule that applies at most intersections in France.
Priority on the right. That means any driver who's coming from your right-hand side gets the right of way, and you have to stop and let them in. Now, this is a rule that exists already in a few other European countries like Ireland or Malta, but it can be a real surprise for new drivers to France.
And same goes for when two cars are turning left at an intersection. Now, in countries like in the United States, the cars will turn in front of each other like this. Whereas here in France, unless it's indicated otherwise, you have to go around the other car like this.
And those are just some of the rules you'll have to learn if you try and get a French driver's license, which is truly a feat unto itself.
Rumor has it, it's really hard to get your driver's license in France. It certainly felt that way when I passed mine a couple of years ago. So I decided to go back to driver's ed to see what it's like today. Daria and Axel, thank you so much for being with us on French Connections.
Hi.
You have a family-owned driving school.
Yeah.
What are the basic requirements to getting your driver's license here?
In order to get the French license, people have to prepare for the theoretical test and then the practical driving exam. So there are two options, or you are a complete beginner and the prefecture requires a minimum of 20 hours of driving practice with a manual or automatic car, or you are already a holder of a foreign license, and then there is no minimum driving classes required, and we advise to have 8 hours minimum.
So the driving test is in French, and the theoretical test is a multiple choice question, right?
Exactly. So there is a 40 question, and people can do only 5 mistakes out of 40. So 35 is good, 34, you need to come back.
And how much does it cost on average to get your license here in France?
In fact, the average is between 1,500 and 2,000, more or less, according to the personal situation. Effectively, people say it's expensive, but here in France there are lots of charges, a lot of taxes, and 1 hour, for example, 1 hour of driving practice is 55 euros. So you add, if you need 20 hours, it goes very quickly. So that's why it looks expensive, but it's a lot of work and preparation.
Would you say it's harder to get your license here in France than in other countries?
I think in all Europe it's the same. The inspectors are very strict.
Now, some people say it's stressful to drive in France. Is there a secret to having a relaxing driving experience here?
When you go to take the French license, you have to forget home habits, and after it goes easy.
So, Axel, you're going to give me a driving lesson so I can hopefully have a relaxing experience behind the wheel?
Let's go. Do you have any fears on driving in Paris?
Well, it can be quite scary to drive in Paris, I must admit. Especially the priorité à droite, the priority on the right. How does that work?
Generally, you must see if there is any signs on the right and a line.
Okay.
If there is no sign, no line, generally you must make sure that you check on the right to see if there is a car coming.
So I have the priority here compared to him, right?
So before overtaking this truck, you must check interior mirror, exterior mirror, blind spots.
Ooh, around it. All right.
So in this situation, you can slow down a bit.
Oops. No. I think I'm nervous.
It's okay.
Take a wide.
So we have a stop sign.
Okay.
So make sure that you stop at the solid lane.
Okay.
For 3 seconds.
So 3 seconds?
Yeah.
Wow, I forgot that.
Yeah, if you just brake and go, for the exam you fail.
Oh no.
Yeah. So how do you feel now?
Better.
Better?
Better. But it feels like going back to school.
Yeah.
Many of you have clearly experienced the joys of driving in France because this actually got a lot of reaction online. Now, to be fair, some of the comments were positive, but most of them were negative. For example, this one from the Fro Whisperer, who said, "I'm glad it's difficult to get a license in France because many people should not be driving. The French drive like New Yorkers."
I also love this comment by David Soder, who said, "Why does everyone tailgate in France? I understand when someone wants to pass a slower moving car, but they kiss my rear bumper even when passing is not an option. Even old ladies do it." And I couldn't agree more, David.
Now, some of you did have questions, like Saria, who wanted to know, what's the penalty system for bad driving?
French driving licenses are issued with 12 points, and points are deducted for bad driving. For instance, if you're caught speeding, you'll be fined 135 euros and you'll lose between 1 and 3 points depending on how much over the speed limit you were.
A full 6 points can be lost for the most serious cases like drinking and driving, and in the most severe instances, you can have your license completely revoked.
Now, as scary as it is, driving in France can also be a lot of fun, and it's a great way to see all the wonderful sights that France has to offer. But just remember to buckle up and drive safely.
That's all the time we have for today's show. Thanks so much for watching. Keep tweeting your questions at Phil Vilmano, and we'll see you soon for a new French Connections Plus.
Come on, Jeannie, let's hit the road.
Okay.
I'm Gulliver Cragg, France 24's correspondent in Kiev. I'm forever crisscrossing Ukraine, Poland and other countries in the region to keep you up to date with all the news from Central and Eastern Europe. Join me on Live from Paris and in all France 24's news and magazine programmes.
Gulliver Cragg, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.